Tonight, Canada outlines an evacuation plan as Israel mobilizes ground troops near the Gaza border. The intensifying barrage from the air.
Nowhere in Gaza is safe.
We want the world to help us.
The pleas for help from stranded Canadians on both sides.
If you care about your citizens, get us home.
Mourning a mother of two killed by Hamas.
We want the world to remember Adi for who she was, not for how she was brutally taken.
The outpouring of grief as a third Canadian victim is identified. Plus a golden opportunity for a high-flying heist.
This was probably very well planned and very well orchestrated.
The lawsuit against Air Canada for $20 million in stolen cargo.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina. Reporting tonight, Sandy Ronaldo.
Good evening. A third Canadian is confirmed dead, murdered by Hamas, as Global Affairs announces help is on the way. Military aircraft will fly Canadians out of Tel Aviv in the coming days. As casualties mount for Israelis and Palestinians. An exchange of rocket fire from both sides. The Israeli military now indicating a shift towards a ground offensive. There are new images of mass atrocities in Israel, growing fears over the fate of hostages, and warnings of a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Millions without power, fresh water, running out of food with nowhere to hide and no way out. Today, feuding Israeli political factions put aside differences as the country buries its dead, among them a Canadian. CTV's Adrian Gobriel is in Tel Aviv and begins our coverage.
The deadly destruction of Gaza City. Israel's assault from the sky hammering the densely inhabited coastal strip with hundreds of airstrikes. Hamas responding tonight with more attacks of its own. This video shows Israel's Iron Dome intercepting rockets, shooting through the night. More than 300,000 reservists have been called up, with many gathering for a possible ground assault on Gaza in response to Saturday's surprise terrorist attack by Hamas militants.
Every truck, I think, maybe 50 victims inside.
Moshe Melalev is a volunteer with the National Rescue Unit. He's been working as a medic near Gaza while also assisting in collecting the dead.
The first body that I took out from the truck, she was, I think, 5 or 6 years old girl with the blown hair, and the terrifying look that she had on her face tell the whole story.
Families with missing loved ones have been arriving here. Dubbed the War Room, individuals are being instructed to bring DNA samples so teams can try and identify the dead and confirm who's still missing. A task even this forensic investigator is finding overwhelming, saying it's very hard. No one prepared us for this. These images in the kibbutz Be'eri tell just part of the nightmare thousands have endured, including Canadians desperate to get home.
This is urgent. This is actual war, and it's no joke.
Canadian-Israeli Alva Yaffe is a single mother of two. She's desperate to get herself and her daughters airlifted to safety, but her multiple calls and emails to the Canadian Embassy have so far gone unanswered.
I mean, everything. Safety. You just want to be with your family in times like these. That's all you want.
Just 6 years old, even the innocence of her young daughter Liv isn't immune to the tragedies unfolding in real time.
What's your hope for the future? What do you hope?
That there won't be silence.
The fear of more attacks is very real here. Following our interview with the family north of Tel Aviv, concerning reports came through in that region that Hezbollah militants may have broken into Israel through Lebanon, and that missiles or drones may also be incoming. That sent everyone scrambling for shelter. After 20 terrifying minutes, thankfully, the all clear was given. Sandy, it was a false alarm.
Adrian, thank you. CTV's Adrian Gobriel in Israel. Now, Adrian mentioned the attack on kibbutz Be'eri in his report, where at least 120 were killed. There are now images showing how the brutality began. Haunting security camera footage captures the start of the rampage early Saturday morning, with 2 Hamas gunmen waiting to carry out an ambush. As a car approaches, one attacker opens fire, killing those inside. Then, running into the open gate, another camera captures them minutes later, hunting for civilians. Now, the 3rd Canadian we know was murdered at a kibbutz. It was one of the first to be brutally attacked by Hamas. The mother of 2 grew up and lived in Israel, but had strong ties to Ottawa. CTV's Jill Makashon has her story.
33-year-old Adi Vital Kaploun is believed to have died trying to protect her children.
She was murdered by terrorists in her home just for being Jewish.
Killed in her kibbutz near the Gaza border, the Canadian-Israeli woman's baby and her 4-year-old were taken by Hamas militants. Witnesses say they became human shields along with a neighbor.
And we were like about 2 kilometers from Gaza. I already saw the houses, and then they told me to go. They released us. I thank God for that, but I don't know why they saved the kid's life and my life.
Vital Kaploun is the first Canadian woman killed in this war, now one of 3 Canadians confirmed dead. 33-year-old Alexandra Luc of Montreal and 22-year-old Ben Mizrahi from Vancouver. Mizrahi's funeral in southern Israel today was streamed back to Canada, his family remembering his kindness and his smile. His aunt called him a hero. He grew up in Canada, she said, but his head was hearing only Israel. This region, so closely connected to Canada through families and religion, is now a place many are trying to escape.
It became clear over a number of days that Canadians needed our assistance.
By the end of the week, Ottawa will send military aircraft to Israel to take Canadian citizens and permanent residents, their spouses and children out. A rare move, government officials say, with Tel Aviv's airport still open, but the support is needed with many commercial flights delayed and canceled.
We got the formal request yesterday, but once this conflict started, we immediately started planning, developing options.
Canadians are now being asked to register and wait for information, which is becoming more difficult as the days go by.
When it's going to be, what time, and nothing. We know nothing.
Well, Canadians in Israel will have options to leave by air. In the occupied West Bank, they will have to travel through Jordan. And in Gaza right now, Sandy, there are no options.
Okay, Jill, thank you. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowed today to, quote, crush and eliminate Hamas, with neither side appearing ready to discuss the fate of the estimated 150 hostages. Here's CTV's Judy Trin.
Mothers of babies, the elderly and teenagers captured at gunpoint, taken hostage by Hamas. But after declaring war on the militants, Israel isn't prioritizing their release.
This is not the time for negotiation. We will get to that once we'll finish the military operation.
Among the hostages are some who hold dual citizenship from other countries. At least 3 Canadians are missing, but the foreign minister refuses to say if they have been captured.
I will not confirm whether Canada has any hostages because I don't want to increase the value and put their lives in danger.
Canada labels Hamas a terrorist organization. Analysts say the capture of civilians is destabilizing in multiple ways.
The first one would be the impact in terms of the psychological warfare, in terms of on the communities, in terms of on the public. That would be number one. Number 2 would be using them as currency in terms of any negotiation.
In 2011, Hamas freed Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit after 5 years in captivity. In exchange, more than 1,000 Palestinian prisoners were released. One of them, Yahya Sinwar, is now a Hamas leader in Gaza. Families of American hostages pleaded for intervention.
On behalf of my family, I'm asking the U.S. not to take a backseat. The U.S. has a lot of resources at its attention.
The U.S. responded by putting pressure on other Arab nations.
That if they have any lines of communication with Hamas, any leverage, any influence with Hamas, they need to use that influence to tell Hamas one very simple and clear message: release all of the hostages.
Hamas is essentially using the hostages as human shields, threatening to execute one hostage for each time Israel bombs a civilian home without warning. Sandy.
CTV's Judy Trin. Inside Gaza, officials say the Seoul power plant has run out of fuel and that a number of children are among the casualties. CTV's Washington Bureau Chief Joy Malbon now on the calls to create humanitarian corridors for civilians caught in the crossfire.
In Gaza City, it is a struggle just to survive. Entire neighborhoods are flattened, leveled by a constant wave of airstrikes. Sometimes the only sound is this. Israel is targeting areas it says is used by Hamas, but along this 40-kilometer strip of land, it appears nowhere is safe.
The number of wounded has not stopped. As you probably heard in the background, the bombing is still going on around the area of the hospital. More and more children are being brought in.
He says hospitals are so overwhelmed they're only treating life-threatening cases now and running out of supplies. Gaza's only power plant shut down after Israel cut off the fuel, along with food and water, in retaliation for the terror attacks, effectively sealing off the Palestinians and raising fears of a humanitarian disaster.
There is nothing that we can do. Even the place that I'm in right now is already almost out of water, almost out of food.
With all of Gaza's crossings closed, the White House confirms the U.S. is in negotiations for a safe corridor that would allow some aid to go in and people out.
Israel and Egypt are the two most significant players when it comes to trying to get that corridor open. We are having active conversations about trying to allow for that safe passage. So again, these civilians did nothing wrong.
For the 70 Canadians trapped in Gaza, Ottawa says they have no way to help without that safe corridor.
All of our Palestinian friends who have family in Gaza are trying to contact them and are terrified. And there's the sense that absolutely no one in the Canadian government is looking out for them.
The United Nations condemns Israel's siege on Gaza, describing conditions as dire, saying hospital generators will run out in days, food and water in less than 2 weeks. Sandy?
All right, Joy, thank you. A mounting concern for the territory, as we've said, Israeli troops massed along the border. Joining us now is Frank Lowenstein, former U.S. Special Envoy for Israeli-Palestinian negotiations. Frank, what would a ground invasion look like in a densely packed urban area with millions of civilians?
It would be unbelievably difficult fighting and devastating for the civilian population. And I think that's why the United States is focused now on trying to create humanitarian corridors to get civilians out of Gaza. We've also started to signal to the Israelis that we do not expect the entire siege will last indefinitely. So I think that we're concerned about that and we're working to address it as we speak.
Hamas must have anticipated the Israelis would enter into a ground invasion. So what is the end game for Hamas?
Well, I think in the first instance, they're trying to create hostages for Palestinian prisoners, and particularly in Israel. Over the longer term, I think their stated objective would be to have the siege, have the blockade of Gaza removed. I don't think that's remotely realistic now. I think they must know that at the end of the day, Israel's going to come in and remove them from power. And honestly, they may be ready for that. They may not want to govern Gaza any longer.
And if Hamas is removed from power, who then would step in?
That's a great question. I can tell you one thing, it will not be the Palestinian Authority. They can barely govern the city of Ramallah and the West Bank. So we would have to start from scratch there.
All right, a lot to unravel as we go forward. This is the beginning of a lot.
Absolutely, sadly.
All right, Frank Lowenstein, thank you. Our website has more on the Israel-Hamas war, including a fact check on misinformation online. Check out ctvnews.ca. Now, the Middle East is not the only area struggling with the loss of life. At least one person is dead and more than 50 injured after a second earthquake shook western Afghanistan. Yesterday's 6.3 quake flattened hundreds of homes in this village outside Herat. It comes 4 days after another strong tremor killed more than 2,000 in the same area. Rescuers were redeployed to help after struggling with the relief effort from Saturday's quake. Coming up, inside a massive heist at Canada's largest airport.
Whoever perpetrated this, no matter how many people are involved, had inside information.
How a thief walked out with millions in gold and cash. Plus, NASA shows off stellar new samples of space rock. It's the stuff of mystery movies, but our next story is real, very real. A $20 million gold and cash heist at Toronto's Pearson Airport. Case unsolved, but now security company Brinks has launched a lawsuit against Air Canada, claiming the airline let a thief fly under the radar and make off with millions. CTV's Heather Butts on how the huge haul was pulled off.
The final acts in the movie-like heist that played out at Toronto's Pearson Airport involved an unidentified person and a way slip. That's all it took to allegedly walk away with more than $20 million in gold bars and cash.
It looks like this was probably very well planned and very well orchestrated.
Investigators have remained tight-lipped, but a lawsuit filed by security company Brinks claims Air Canada was reckless in its operation of the AC Secure program. The plane carrying the precious cargo from Zurich to Toronto on April 17th landed just minutes before 4 p.m. It was offloaded and taken to a warehouse. Roughly 2.5 hours later, someone came in, then vanished with a multi-million-dollar haul. No security protocols or features were in place to monitor, restrict, or otherwise regulate the unidentified individual's access to the facilities, reads the statement of claim.
So it does feel like a house of cards where you look at the security at the airport and think, oh my God, this can prevent terrorism, theft, everything. And then there's literally a back door.
Brinks calls Air Canada negligent and careless, alleging it accepted a fake waybill without verifying its authenticity.
During the course of this transaction, that individual was able to fool everybody and basically walk out the door with the gold and the banknotes.
Air Canada won't comment while the case is before the courts. This lawyer and heist expert sees it as a slam dunk for Brinks.
Brinks is saying maybe it's negligence, maybe it's an inside man. But if it's an inside man, that's still Air Canada's negligence in hiring or supervising this person. I don't really see what Air Canada can come back with.
A police investigation is ongoing. According to court documents, no arrests have been made and the shipments have not been recovered. Heather Butts, CTV News, Toronto.
Well, a Canadian toy maker is now playing in the same space with another big fish in the children's toy and entertainment business. Toronto-based Spin Master bought out the popular U.S. brand Melissa & Doug for a whopping $1.3 billion Canadian. Spin Master is best known for its Paw Patrol and Rubik's Cube brands. Still ahead, unwelcome visitors for a small Saskatchewan village. The community pushed to get an extremist cult to leave. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was in the Northwest Territories touring the charred remains left behind by the wildfires that ripped through the region in August. Trudeau's first stop was in the town of Enterprise, where nearly all homes and structures were destroyed. He later went to Hay River, ravaged by fire, and met with the mayor and fire chief. 95 fires are still active in the territories. Well, a small Saskatchewan village is in the spotlight tonight after a cult leader allegedly issued a threat of public executions. The QAnon-inspired conspiracy theorist has made herself at home, and now her neighbors want her gone. CTV's Alison Bamford reports.
Romana Didulo, the self-proclaimed Queen of Canada, seen here setting up her nightly video message from the village of Richmond. But for the last few weeks, the conspiracy theorist and her followers have been met with a different message.
Go somewhere else.
You're not guaranteeing our safety at all.
The majority in the village of less than 200 attended a public meeting hosted by the Saskatchewan RCMP this week. Many concerned, others inconvenienced.
I'm not afraid of these people. I mean, they make threats, but they're just like a bully.
But the group is welcomed by some. One person allowed them to set up camp on his private property.
They want to know who's on my property, when are they leaving, and what are they doing? And if I walked up to you and said, hey, who's in your house this weekend? What relatives are around? Would that not be invasion of privacy?
RCMP say they are trying to balance the charter rights of both groups. Mounties set up a mobile detachment in the village, an effort to de-escalate tensions as officers investigate an alleged assault, threats of public execution, and suspicious activity.
Resources that are wholly dedicated to this particular situation and providing for the peace and security of the town.
This isn't the first time the group has tried to plant roots in Saskatchewan. The town of Kamsak drove Didulo and her followers out last month for allegedly making threats against healthcare workers.
The fact that they're constantly stirring up trouble and talking negative about the townspeople doesn't help. And I think that just turns up the temperature on the whole thing.
RCMP say there is no imminent safety risk to the community. Still, people are planning a weekend-long protest to keep Didulo and her followers from settling in permanently. Allison Bamford, CTV News, Regina.
After the break, soon to be under Canadian microscopes, precious samples of space rock from a faraway and ancient asteroid. Canadian scientists are very excited. They're about to get their hands on bits of an asteroid, some 4.5 billion years old. The samples, courtesy NASA, could help us understand the origins of life on planet Earth. CTV's Melanie Nagy reports.
Take a peek. A reveal 12 years in the making. That loose dust and those chunky rocks are the result of an extraordinary extraterrestrial mission.
It will help scientists investigate our planet's formation and for us all to experience our next giant leap.
The material, publicly displayed for the first time today, was brought to Earth by NASA after it was collected from an ancient asteroid called Bennu.
It's the first time that the United States has brought a sample back from space and landed it safely on Earth.
After years of planning, a NASA spacecraft landed on far-off Bennu in 2020. While it scooped up some of the asteroid's surface back then, the extreme distance meant it only deposited the sample in September. This mission will help our scientists investigate planet formation. Scientists say Bennu formed some 4.5 billion years ago. With it virtually unchanged, they believe it will help us learn more about our origins.
To understand whether asteroids like Bennu could have not only delivered the water that led to our oceans, but actually seed the Earth with prebiotic chemicals, the building blocks of life.
One building block is carbon, which researchers discovered in their initial analysis. They also found evidence of water.
This is a moment to feel really good about Canada's science and technology. The Canadian Space Agency is a partner on this.
That's right. Canada has been a key player by providing technology that helped map Bennu. For that, we're getting some of the asteroid.
Canada is entitled to 4% of the sample, which is 1/25th.
That share will go to the Canadian Space Agency, a treasure trove of material soon to be studied here. Melanie Nagy, CTV News, Vancouver. And that is our newscast for this Wednesday. I'm Sandy Ronaldo. For Omar and all of us at CTV National News, thank you for sharing your time with us. Have a good night, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye for now.